I rushed outside to wave the ambulance in, only to find my neighbor Deborah's SUV deliberately blocking my driveway while my mom struggled to breathe inside. How was I supposed to know that when this power-hungry HOA president refused to move her car for the paramedics, she'd soon discover exactly who my mother really was? It all started 3 weeks ago when I brought Mom home after her major heart surgery. Deborah, our HOA president, immediately began harassing us, claiming Mom's presence violated neighborhood rules. She slapped us with fines, photographed our house, and even called an emergency board meeting to discuss Mom's unauthorized residency. Despite my pleas, Deborah refused to back down, insisting that rules are rules. The final straw came when Mom's condition worsened in the middle of the night. As I called 911, Deborah blocked the ambulance with her SUV, delaying paramedics as Mom fought for breath. When I confronted her, she smugly cited HOA bylaws, refusing to move her car. That's when I revealed Mom's true identity: Chief Sandra Martinez of the Boston Police Department. Deborah's face turned ghostly white as the paramedics rushed Mom to the hospital with a police escort. But this was just the beginning. The incident sparked a neighborhood uprising against Deborah's tyranny, revealing years of abuse and selective enforcement. In the end, Deborah was forced to resign, and the HOA implemented new safety protocols named after Mom. What started as a personal battle became a community revolution, proving that no one is above the law, not even the HOA president. As the ambulance sped toward the hospital, I gripped Mom's hand tightly, feeling the frailty of her fingers within my own. Her oxygen mask fogged with each shallow breath, and I could see the beads of sweat forming on her forehead despite the chilly night air. The paramedics worked frantically, their voices low but urgent as they exchanged medical jargon I barely understood. One of them, a woman with kind eyes, gave me a reassuring glance. "She's strong. We'll do everything we can." I swallowed the lump in my throat and leaned closer. "Hang on, Mom," I whispered, my voice trembling despite my efforts to stay calm. "We're almost there. Just hold on." The sirens wailed as we tore through the darkened city streets, the city lights flashing in quick succession outside the ambulance windows. My heart pounded in time with the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor, each second feeling like an eternity. The paramedic pressed a hand to my shoulder. "Talk to her," he urged. "Sometimes familiar voices help." So I did. I told Mom about everything she had to look forward to: the blooming roses in her backyard, the way the neighborhood kids would wave at her from their bikes, the countless cups of coffee we still had to share. Anything to keep her anchored. Anything to keep her with me. When we finally arrived at Boston General, a team of doctors and nurses were already waiting at the emergency bay, their movements swift and precise. They whisked Mom away before I could even say goodbye, leaving me standing in the cold, sterile corridor, my hand still clenched in the air where hers had been just moments before. The waiting room was a cruel place, where time crawled and hope flickered like a dying flame. My phone buzzed incessantly, texts from concerned neighbors, updates from Officer Jenkins, even a call from a local news station wanting a statement. The story had already gone viral. I could barely process it all, my mind fixated on the closed doors leading to the ICU, where my mother's fate hung in the balance. Back in Pinecrest Estates, the neighborhood was in upheaval. Deborah's arrest had sent shockwaves through the community, and suddenly, those who had suffered under her rule found their voices. The HOA board held emergency meetings to discuss the scandal, but they were too late to contain the storm. People I had never spoken to before, people who had once kept their heads down to avoid trouble, were now stepping forward with their own stories. Mr. Wilson, the gentle old man who lived 3 houses down, shared how Deborah had once killed his flowering vines with weed killer because they had dared to grow over the edge of his property line. The Lopez family, who had been forced to dismantle their children's playhouse after receiving a series of unfair fines, spoke of the heartbreak on their kids' faces when they had to tear it down. Even the elderly Johnsons, who had never complained about anything, admitted how Deborah had fined them for allowing their grandson to stay with them during the COVID lockdown, claiming it was an unauthorized tenant violation. Stories like these kept pouring in, each one more infuriating than the last. It became clear that Deborah hadn't just enforced the rules, she had weaponized them, wielding the HOA's power like a personal scepter to control and punish at her discretion. The next morning, exhausted but determined, I returned home. As I pulled into the driveway, I was met with an unexpected sight. A large crowd gathered in front of my house. Neighbors stood in clusters, murmuring amongst themselves, while Officer Jenkins moved between them, jotting down notes. The tension was palpable, the energy electric. Tom, my best friend and one of the few people I had always trusted in the neighborhood, waved me over. His face was alight with something between excitement and righteous anger. "Dude, this is insane," he said, pulling out his phone and showing me footage from his doorbell camera. It clearly captured Deborah's actions from the night before, blocking the ambulance, refusing to move, smirking in the face of a desperate plea. "This is solid proof," Tom said, his voice tight. "She's done for. The whole street saw what she did. There's no coming back from this." It wasn't long before Deborah's husband, Frank, showed up, his face drawn with worry. He approached me hesitantly, wringing his hands, his wedding ring glinting under the morning sun. "Please," he said, his voice low. "Deborah's not a bad person. She gets carried away with the rules." I stared at him, a bitter laugh bubbling up in my throat. "Carried away? She nearly cost my mother her life. Do you have any idea how many people she's hurt?" Frank had the decency to look ashamed. But shame wasn't enough. I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick folder, Tom's compilation of Deborah's misconduct, filled with documented complaints, video evidence, and proof of her selective enforcement. I thrust it into Frank's hands. "Tell her to resign," I said coldly, "or this goes public." The emergency HOA meeting that evening was unlike anything the neighborhood had ever seen. The community center was packed, every chair filled, every inch of standing space occupied. Tension hung thick in the air as people murmured among themselves, awaiting the moment when Deborah would have to face them. Despite her hospitalization, Mom insisted on attending. She sat in the front row, still pale but with a fire in her eyes that told me she wasn't going to let this slide. When it was her turn to speak, she stood, adjusting the badge pinned to her blazer. The room fell silent. "Last week, I nearly died because someone in this room decided that HOA rules were more important than human life," she said, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "This isn't just about me. It's about making sure no one else suffers because of unchecked power." The board members exchanged glances. Deborah, standing stiffly near the front, looked as if she wanted to disappear. When the vote was finally cast, it was unanimous. New safety protocols were implemented immediately, later named the Martinez Safety Initiative in Mom's honor. Deborah resigned on the spot, her face red with humiliation as she stormed out. Tom, always one for theatrics, waited until she was gone before stepping forward, waving a final document in the air. "Oh, and by the way," he announced, "here's proof that Deborah's been pocketing HOA fines." The room erupted in outrage. Justice had finally been served. In the weeks that followed, the neighborhood slowly began to heal. Mr. Wilson replanted his vines, the Lopez kids rebuilt their playhouse, and the Johnsons' grandson visited without fear of fines. I was elected to the new HOA board, ensuring fairness for all. One evening, as Mom and I sat on the porch watching kids play in the cul-de-sac, she smiled. "You know, sometimes it takes one person standing up to a bully to change everything." "You mean you?" I asked. She shook her head. "No, you fought for me before anyone knew I was chief. That's real courage." Deborah and Frank put their house up for sale soon after, unable to face the community they had once ruled over. The final victory came a month later, when I received a certified letter. The HOA was refunding all medical-related fines and formally apologizing. And as I watched the new family move into Deborah's old house, I knew, Real power doesn't come from rules. It comes from neighbors who truly care for one another. If you like this video, so please like, subscribe my channel and watch more stories.